Epoxy resin or UV resin? Which one is better? What's going on, my fellow jewelers? Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I'm going to answer the age-old question. Is epoxy resin better or is UV resin better? I'm going to compare the two. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do so, but let's dive right in right now. Now with epoxy, let's talk about the epoxy curing rate, like how fast it dries. You guys like cure? I know that's the proper term, but how fast it dries, how fast it cures. Can I tell you, epoxy takes a lot longer. It takes anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, depending on how the temperature of the room, other factors and stuff. Sometimes they do have faster drying epoxy, but I find that it doesn't dry as fast as it says. Like I saw like some say 4 hours, but you need bigger projects. Like you need like coasters or these big statues or whatever. When you have just like earrings or the pendants that I do, it takes longer to cure. So the more you have, more epoxy you have, the faster it dries. But the little guys, they dry a lot longer. Now with UV resin, it takes minutes, like seriously minutes. You do a layer and then like dry it for, or cure it for a minute, and then another layer and cure it for a minute or 2 minutes. You know what I'm saying? And so it will take minutes. You can do a project like that. And so depending on your patience or whatever, I would go with the UV resin when it comes to the curing speed. Now the next one, let's talk about prices. When it comes to the epoxy versus the UV is way more expensive. Like when I do big mass projects, like if I have a huge order and I want to use resin, I always go to my epoxy because it's so much less expensive. The UV, it's a lot more expensive. And so if you're doing a bigger project, like if someone asks you, like I had over 200 jewelry pieces I had to do in a couple months, I went to epoxy because I knew I could save money, time, maybe not so much, but at least I knew I'd be saving my wallet and saving the people that wanted to buy from me and stuff. So even though it takes a lot longer, the epoxy, the price is much better. Now let's talk about coloring. When you're coloring your resin, epoxy, you can color it till the cows come home and it doesn't matter. But with UV resin, you have to be very careful. You have to be so careful how you color your UV resin because if you color it too dark, then the UV light can't penetrate and it stays sticky. And so that's not a good thing. So I like that I have the freedom to color my epoxy as much as I want, as dark as I want. Now the next one is epoxy cures on its own. Like it doesn't need sunlight, it doesn't need a UV light, like it cures on its own. And I like that. I like that I can just leave it alone and that it will do its thing. But with the UV resin, you have to have your lamp, or you can take it out in the sunshine and cure it. You actually need something for it to cure or it to dry. So then the next thing let's talk about is with epoxy, you need two of them. You need two for the most part. Like there's the 1-in-1 ratio, or sometimes it depends on the product, but you need two of them. And when you have two of them, you have to follow the instructions perfectly. If you don't, then it won't cure properly. It'll be sticky, it won't dry. If you stir it too fast, you'll get bubbles. If you don't stir it long enough, it won't have a chemical reaction and it won't dry properly. I mean, all these things, right? So I didn't like it. Like once you get the hang of it and you know exactly how it works and exactly how you need to stir it and how long you need to stir it, then it's a piece of cake. But to get that, sometimes it takes a while, and I messed up on a bunch of resin, and it's the worst. Can I tell you? It is the worst when you wait 24 hours and you demold the epoxy resin and you didn't mix it properly and it comes out sticky and that time is wasted, completely wasted. With this guy, like you put the light on it. Now, if you put too much color in it, it may not. You put the light on it, you flip it to one side, you flip the other side. And for the most part, this does a pretty good job of curing and stuff. So I don't really worry when I'm using UV resin when it comes to the curing. I do worry a bit when it comes to the epoxy. The next one is they stink. Can I just say, like these two, these two, epoxy and UV resin, they have a smell. They have an odor. I don't care what the package says, it has an odor and it stinks. And sometimes it can last for 24 hours. Usually with UV resin, it just lasts until you cure it. So a couple minutes and then clear out the room and it's done. But with epoxy, I don't let my kids in the room after I do epoxy projects. I don't let that, because it just stinks for probably about 24 24 hours, maybe 12 hours, but it just stinks a lot longer. So that's a kind of thing. Here's the deal though. They're both toxic. They're both toxic. You need gloves for both of them. You need a respirator for both of them. You need to wear not your favorite clothes and clothes you don't mind maybe ruining and stuff, because they're both toxic. So at the end of the day, which one do I like better? Oh, I have to say I love them both. I have to say that I encourage everybody that does resin to get familiar with both, because there's so many times, more than I can count with the fingers on my hand, that I wanted both, or that I could use this one for this project and then this one for this project, right? Like I like that I have the diversity of knowing how to use both, because there's so many times that I'm not just going to use UV resin for everything I do, and I'm not going to just use epoxy for everything I do as well. And so I encourage you that if you just do epoxy resin, get familiar with UV resin. And if you just do UV resin, get familiar with epoxy. And I know it takes a moment to get the hang of either one. It doesn't matter, either one of them, but I think they have such good pros and cons. And I've even had pieces where I use both epoxy and UV, and it turned out beautifully. So I would encourage you to use both. I really don't have a favorite. I'm actually pretty, absolutely love both of them. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to see more videos like this, or you want to see me make jewelry with resin, or I do beaded jewelry, check out my other videos. But other than that, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!